Hey guys, welcome back to still don't have a name for it. Different Breed Skool podcast is what we're going with for now. I'm here with Yoga with Olive, who you all know. They've done our warm ups and then some cool downs, and they did a video on creating movement loops. So you've all probably seen them. But Olive, I'm going to pass over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, what you're about, what you do in the fitness industry?
Yeah, so I'm Olive. My pronouns are they, them. And I've been coaching for about 7 years now. So just ticked over into 7 years, I think, back in April. And predominantly started with yoga, did that for 3 years, and then started getting more and more interested in other movement modalities. I did my animal flow training. I was exploring a lot of like mobility and floor work sort of by myself. Um, I then invested in a coach, and in the background of this, I completed my PT qualification and started doing a bit of that. And so for the past like 4 years, have also incorporated more strength-based training, and within that, exploring some Cali work, and I do a lot of like inversion training and skill-based training as well. So kind of a bunch of shit
Yeah,
altogether.
a lot of different stuff. But that's really cool because you've got such a diverse background that most people don't have, I would say, which is really cool. I don't know. Is there anything that you find particularly interesting about having that mix of different things? Or I suppose to you it's normal though, right?
Yeah, I think because I grew up doing a load of different sports and practices, I think it's normal for me to do a lot now as well in my adult life. Like I did a range of things from netball, swimming, track and field, horse riding, a little bit of dance and gymnastics. So to have a wide variety of how I move my body has always been the norm to me and just feels quite normal. I felt quite restricted actually just doing one specific thing. Like even when I
Yeah.
was very much absorbed in the sphere of yoga, I did do climbing. So there was like another component to what I did. Um, yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. I won't introduce myself. You guys all probably know me. When I say you guys, obviously the people who are watching. There's not just like a little group of people sat here that I'm chatting to. But yeah, I won't introduce myself. You guys all know me. But I thought today the reason me and Olive wanted to jump on here is because, and you'll probably agree with me, I think we've both seen there's been quite a rise of kind of just general bigotry within the fitness industry, whether that's transphobia, sexism, even fatphobia to some extent, which I think is in a way becoming worse, even though there are a lot more representations of larger people in fitness now. And I think both of us are relatively well placed to have like a little bit of a just a little bit of an opinion about it. And I thought it'd be interesting for everyone just to hear some people have a chat who are relative minorities within the fitness industry. Myself, obviously, I'm mixed race, so there are just not as many mixed race people about in the world as and in the fitness industry especially. And also I've got a bit of a horse in the race just from the fact that my parents are gay. So whilst I'm not, I don't know, I'd probably identify myself as just kind of some, I'll just say I'm doing what I'm doing. I'd say straight-ish is probably where I land, is how I'd describe it, which I think is a
Yeah.
fair assessment. Whereas, so I don't necessarily have a huge horse in the race in that sense, but I think I've grown up around people who are, well, gay, and I've seen discrimination because of that. I've also spoken to them about what it was like for them as they were younger. And just, yeah, so I think I've got a bit of a horse in the race. And I don't know, would you like to sort of introduce where your background is and kind of where you come at this whole thing from?
Yeah, so like yourself, I'm also mixed race, like a brown person. Um, Um, in the most simple sense. Mum's Indian, dad's English, but I grew up in Dubai for 18 years. So the way that I also kind of tie it in is that I'm a third culture kid. So I grew up in a country that I'm not from. Um, and it's been quite confusing, and I'm sure you can relate to this. Like I sometimes feel way too white to be Indian and way too brown to be English. And I don't feel like I necessarily fit in into either of those cultures. And ironically, the culture that I am most comfortable with is the culture in Dubai because there are a lot of people from so many different ethnic backgrounds that it's become this really beautiful melting pot of
Yeah.
individuals. And don't get me wrong, Dubai has its own faults, but in terms of representation and seeing people from such diverse backgrounds, it's really incredible for that. So I feel quite like centered in Dubai,
Yeah.
despite its other issues with homophobia. Um, so it's a bit of a weird one. Like my head is still navigating how I feel and how I slot into certain spaces. But that's sort of like my background. I've lived in the UK now for just over 10 years. Um, and I changed my pronouns maybe, yeah, it was last July. I was sort of experimenting with introducing they them, but I was still also using she her. But it was last year where I like officially kind of transitioned or made the change to using they them, and it was sort of like it was a few years in the making. I had been thinking about it for a while, but I didn't yet feel comfortable about coming out about it and as coming out as non-binary. Um, yeah, but I've been queer. I've known about that since I was like 8 years old.
Okay. As I imagine most people do, it's kind of something that's in you more than it doesn't just
Yeah.
appear overnight.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But similar to like a lot of people, I was quite closeted for a very, very long time because there wasn't that much representation, particularly in Dubai. Again, like I sort of mentioned beforehand, it was illegal and still is to be queer by any sense. So whilst there were some teachers who we knew, and we did have family friends who were two gay men and they were married and they were living together, it was still very much like hush hush when it came out in like public spaces and everything like that. But yeah, there wasn't huge representation, so I never felt like I was able to have conversations with people about it. And even sort of navigating being mixed race was quite different because I didn't have a lot of people around me who were mixed race. Like a lot of my friends were like just Indian or just Pakistani or just English or just Australian. Like they didn't have tons of mixed heritage. Um, there were obviously a couple, but yeah, it can feel like quite a lonely experience sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that. I think I've had a potentially a bit of an easier time because I don't have that like third culture thrown in. Something I've always found a bit weird being mixed races. I think, especially, I grew up in Salisbury, which is like it's technically a city, but it's so small. It's just like it is a white town of English people who've been English for like however many years. And one thing I will say is I basically experienced like minimal racism growing up. I've got to say it's like a very inclusive place. But with that being said, culturally, I'm so like ingrained in white English culture. Like that's very much how I operate. And like I when I moved to Bristol, which is obviously a lot more multicultural, I found it really hard to fit in, actually not with white people, but with black people, because I'd assume loads of things that I'd like or know, and loads of times I'd be like, I literally don't have a clue what you're telling me. And they'd always be really surprised. I'm like, how don't you know that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I just grew up around white people. So it is always like it's just one of those weird things to navigate. I don't know if it's never I wouldn't say it was necessarily bad, but it's definitely an odd place to be. And I think, especially with the Jamaican side of my family, who all of my memory of it have been absolutely love me. They really like me. They're super supportive. But when I was first born, it was a very matriarchal family. So Sarah's mum, one of my mums, Mrs. Pinnock, I used to call her Mrs. Pin, didn't really want to know me originally because she was very Christian. So it was a massive surprise because I think when my parents came out, it wasn't, oh, we're together, and then a couple down years down the line I came. It was, by the way, we've been together this whole time since we were 16. Also, we're having a child. And she was just like, yeah, no. And just didn't really want anything to do with me. And then, long story short, Sarah got cancer. Her mum came to visit. Turns out she really liked me, and it was kind of like problem solved. But it was definitely something that I always think has kind of led me to lean a little bit more to the sort of white British side, because like my grandparents are very traditional on Julie's side, very very, imagine a middle class white family from London. That's what they're like. But they were a lot more accepting. I think it was harder for my grandma, but my grandpa just took it in his stride, like at least from what I know of it. And I mean, it doesn't surprise me. The older I get, the more he tells me little things. Like we were chatting about OnlyFans being a real thing. He was like, "Well, don't tell your grandma." But I actually used to have a friend who did sex work to get through university. But keep that on the hush. He's just like, I think he's a lot more accepting than potentially he makes out. He's just always sort of played the game. But no, I know what you mean. It can be a bit of a weird position to be mixed race, and I think the more mixed race
Yeah.
people I know, the more everyone seems to have this similar thing of now we're older, there's a lot more of us. But go back 20 years, there actually weren't that many people dotting about.
Yeah, and it's like, your experience as a mixed race person can differ so vastly. Like, obviously, my brother and I are the same, but the way in which he has had sort of interactions is very, very different to myself. And even my cousins, more on my mum's side, so the Indian side of my family, um, my older cousins have an Indian dad as well. So they're a lot darker than me, but they've grown up in the UK their entire life. So again, their like cultural understanding is very much English compared to like myself. And then on the other side, I have younger cousins, and they're half Indian, half American, and look also very, very different compared to me and my brother. And they've had a very different upbringing growing up in Dubai as well, and now in America. So it's really fascinating to kind of unpick it because we're all within the same realm. We all share the same genes, but we're all very different in how we've experienced and navigated the world. So, yeah.
It's a really interesting thing. I would love to hear more about it, actually. As I've got older, I've realized mixed race is like this really odd bubble because it's a lot of people who are kind of like, well, I sort of just exist. And generally, your parents don't really look like you, and they probably have a little bit different culture to you, but they've made you. And then you sort of have these, like, you relate to other mixed race people, but normally they've got a totally different experience, just like you say, which is pretty fascinating. I think it's pretty interesting. The older I get, the more I'm like, oh, that is kind of weird, isn't it?
So strange. But like growing up, I always felt a bit weird, like walking around with my family, because me and my brother like are quite dark and look a lot like our mum. But compared to our dad, he's like white, blue eyes, like light brown
Yeah.
hair. I was like, we don't even look like we're related to you. Like, I wonder what people are thinking when we're walking around and like, as a family,
Yeah.
it's like, who is this bloke?
No, do you know what? I had the same thing. So my mum is blue eyes, blonde hair, and I used to have this friend that I hung out with all the time when I was younger, and we all went to the shop together. And I remember the person referred to my friend as my mum's daughter, and she was like, "No, no, no, that's my son," and he was like, "Sorry, what?" Because she obviously they were both blonde, blue eyes, so it just assumed, which like no harm, no foul. It wasn't anything offensive. It was just in the conversation. They just said it, but it is one of those where you kind of are like, oh yeah, people won't realize we're actually a family. Well, sometimes they
Yeah.
will, sometimes they won't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a funny one like that. I also had like a similar one with my aunties, and this was kind of like reflective of like a lot of internalized homophobia that I kind of grew up with. I remember going around like a shopping mall in London with my mum and auntie, and I was so fearful that people were going to see them together and not assume that they were sisters, despite them looking like so similar, but like thinking that they were together as a queer
Okay.
couple and that I was their kid. And I was like, I remember feeling like so ashamed of that. And I was like, where the hell has this come from? It was
Yeah.
so crazy. And I've like unpacked it over the years and like spoken to friends about it who had like weirdly similar experiences. But yeah.
No, it makes sense though, because I think there's an awful lot of that that's kind of forced on the younger generations. And like, of course, like you end up having this kind of duality of people like yourself who will look back at that and go, ah, that probably isn't quite right. And I had a really similar thing with racism actually, and I remember really distinctly when it was happening. I was having a shitty day, and it was when I worked in Starbucks, and this super black couple walked in, like crazy dark. I think they must have been like there wasn't loads of people in black people in Salisbury. There was a lot of Nigerians, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, they probably don't speak very good English. And then I like sort of looked down at my hands and I was like, what are you even thinking, mate? Like, where has that come from? And it's like one of those like things where it's just like, oh, that's not me. That's something that's been put into me, which like obviously yourself, you said you're queer. Like it's like, why would you care if so if there is a queer couple? But it's like it is these weirdly ingrained things that you come out when you're younger, and then I think you get sort of like 5 years down the line and you go, wait, what the fuck is that? Like, where did that come from? What was that? Um, and I think that's quite a nice segue into talking about what we're seeing within the fitness industry right now. Because I don't know about you, but I've definitely seen, at least from my perspective, a large rise in things like homophobia, sexism, ableism, transphobia, and I think a lot of that is potentially internalized hate, or just kind of like the trickle down effect of what we see at a lot of the top of the industry, like people like the Andrew Tates or even like the Mike O'Hearns and stuff like that. What's your sort of take on what's been going on in the industry at the moment? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think we went through a really positive wave like a couple years ago with the rise of um the body positivity movement, for all its sort of pitfalls, it did bring into the limelight how fat phobic our society was, and it did put people in larger bodies at the forefront. But I've been having conversations with clients and friends of mine who are in larger bodies, and one of them is like has quite a big platform now, and she was saying how she's had conversations with other bigger influencers who are just losing work left, right, and center. There's just no more work for them anymore. Like there are no brand deals, no marketing, no advertising campaigns because companies aren't interested anymore. And it's this whole thing where bodies are trends, and it's now going through this wave again where like 90s heroin chic, where Tumblr pro Ana content is back in the form of skinny talk. So as a result, all these people who are in bigger bodies are now being pushed to the sidelines. Fat phobia is back on the rise, and it's been quite scary to see that again and to see like some really awful comments towards these people who have been quite prevalent in certain spaces like over the past couple of years. Um, and to kind of go back onto skinny talk, it's like reinforcing this idea that women are meant to be small and subservient and frail and weak and all of this. And someone who I follow did a really interesting article and got loads of hate for this about how the new Pilates body slash skinny top is like leading to like fascism in America.
Okay.
Really, really interesting. And again, got a lot of like disagreement from it and a lot of hate. But the political standpoint is that, again, we're sort of coming back to the whole idea that women are weak and frail. They shouldn't build strength. They shouldn't have that. And it's a very like misogynistic take. And it's like there's underlying levels of misogyny now coming about in the fitness space again. And it's really scary to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think there's massive amounts of misogyny coming back. And it's really interesting, actually, because I think you've identified something quite good there with the misogyny of it's like there was a lot of positivity around larger bodies, which I think in a way kind of leaked into allowing more muscular women as well to kind of hold a bit of space. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's kind of allowing diverse body types, which really I think was what it all came down to. It's like the gym should be for everyone. It's like if you are someone who's larger, you have every right to go and be fit and be healthy and try and do good things for your body. And it's like, plenty of people who aren't in larger bodies smoke. Do you know what I mean? It's like everyone has different vices. People just like to eat a few more calories and they like being bigger. It's not a problem. Like you can still train, you can still do everything for your life. It means nothing. There's nothing wrong with you. And now we're seeing this skinny talk. I only found out about skinny talk maybe a couple months ago. Someone mentioned it to me, and I went on TikTok, and I remember being like, what the fuck? Like, there are people who are being like, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Do you really need that extra meal? Like, all of this stuff. And I was just thinking, you can't say that to children because they're going to internalize this in such a bad way. But I think both things where you're seeing this push towards keeping women skinny and weaker and moving away from this idea of like, it's okay to be different shapes of bodies actually does kind of draw into misogyny quite a lot because I've seen it just since dating Em, who is like not even that big a human. Like she looks big because she's always next to me, but I'm 5'2". Like Em's like 5'7". She's marginally above average height and like relatively well muscled. But it's not like she's a fucking pro bodybuilder. She just looks after her health. And people will always be like, "Ah, oh, women shouldn't be that big. You shouldn't be that strong." And it's kind of like, where's this idea come from? Because if someone just looks after their health, they're going to build muscle. Like that's just and women and men, or I should say, like female and male sex bodies respond to muscle growth in the same way. Like that's been proven. It's just like a really normal part of being alive.
Yeah, yeah, I don't really understand where the whole narrative around like why do you want to look muscular has kind of come from. And it's obviously come from like misogynistic like thought spheres and all of that. But I thought we kind of got over it, especially last year, it was the Olympics. Saw so
Yeah.
many different diverse body types competing, whether it was from like shot put, whether it was a marathon runners, whether it was horse riders, whether it was like football, rugby, whatever, like you name it, you saw so many different body shapes and sizes who were competing for their country in their sport. And I don't understand how, literally a year later, it's all seemed to have been completely forgotten about. And now it's this whole perception that if you train, you need to look like you're about to be stage ready for a bodybuilding comp.
Yeah.
Or on the
Yeah.
flip side, if you are a cis woman, you're meant to be super lean and toned and all of this.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, and I think it will all obviously have different views. I think so much of it comes back to kind of like the manosphere, which I know like a lot of people don't necessarily like to like say is a real thing, but I'm becoming more and more convinced that actually like the people like Andrew Tate, the people like what's his name? King King Abduli, I don't know. Just basically turns out he raped someone when he was like 18 and it was like a 15-year-old girl and he's just like lying about, but he's like admitted he was arrested and convicted for it and is now trying to pull back on it. But it's like he's massive in talking to young men. And even people like Chris Williamson, who I'm actually a massive fan of Chris Williamson. I think he's a really good podcaster. And I think 90% of the time he hits it on the mark. But he had someone on yesterday and I was listening to it. And for the first 45 minutes, it was going on about like men have to provide physical safety. They have to do this. They have to provide financial safety. They have to provide emotional security, or there's no way a woman can feel safe in that relationship, and a woman can't be attracted in a relationship without this. And they're kind of like talking about it like it's a fact. But I'm like, well, and then they went on to talk about how like because men have been raised by women, they're not able to step into their full masculinity, which is causing issues. And it just misses the mark so much because I'm like, well, I was raised by two women who, without
Mm,
the masculinity, were able to develop a healthy relationship. I've grown up to be
yeah,
pretty successful. I'm happy. I'm stable. I've got a good relationship. And none of
yeah.
those problems that are apparently so apparent without this perfect level of masculinity and femininity were real for me. And I think people forget that it's like there's quite literally thousands and if not millions of people who show that that isn't the case. But I think a lot of young kids don't have any friends who maybe have gay parents, or they don't have any friends who use they them pronouns. They don't have any friends who have maybe transitioned or are thinking about it. They don't have gay friends. But what they do have is their phone and the manosphere feeding them all of this fucking nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's terrifying when you think about like the platforms that some of these people have and the information that they are sharing to the younger generation. And you're so impressionable when you were younger. Like there are direct links between my eating disorder and the content that I watched on Tumblr. Do you know what I mean? And I know I've had conversations with loads of other people, same age group as us, who thank Tumblr for their disordered eating patterns. And it's like that, none of that shit was regulated at all. And I don't understand how, like, we've just not learnt from that and how we're still platforming these people who have really harmful narratives about things. Yeah, it's a weird, scary one.
It's a scary one. And I think, unfortunately, it's because there are a lot of adults who still believe it.
Mm.
And I mean, I think it's like, it's a similar thing with the rise that you're seeing in racism. Like, I get called, like, to, to not use the actual word, like a nignog, nearly every
Yeah,
day since I've started posting on social media. Someone DMs me something monkey this, N word that, like every single day. And I think it's like no kids are born hating gay people,
yeah,
hating trans people. No kids are born hating you because your skin's darker than them. It's all
yeah,
learned behavior, and whether it's learned from parents or it's learned from social media and then reinforced by parents not counteracting it, I don't know.
yeah.
But I mean, fundamentally, I believe that a lot of it is coming down from just a complete lack of understanding of human beings. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, I don't know. For you, how have you found interacting with people, whether that's about your race or your own sexuality or pronouns? Just like, how do you find actually talking to people day to day? Because I don't know if it's kind of like an internet thing or a real world thing.
I think like, well, the other thing you kind of got to consider is that I'm in Brighton and it's like
Yeah.
the queerest place in the UK. So in terms of that, I'm very, very safe and very comfortable. But when I first moved here, like Brighton was very white. And it took me quite a long time to feel settled and to feel like I had friends that just had this underlying understanding about me. Like all my friends were white, and I'm not saying there's anything bad about that, but I'm just saying that there's just a fundamental level where we don't maybe fully understand each other because we exist in the world very differently. Like season to season as well, I'm treated slightly differently because of how dark my skin is. Do you know what I mean? So again, like it's just one of those things that I'm aware of, but someone who's white won't be aware of that and will be able to just kind of like navigate the changes in the seasons, like, however. And talking about it can feel, I don't know again if this is like my own internalized racism because I grew up like really ashamed of myself for being Indian. And it was because I was like bullied as a kid for being Indian, basically. And it was only until I got to 21 where I was like actually proud of it and like actually like wanted to be perceived as mixed race. For like majority of my life, I was trying to be just an English person, basically. So again, I don't know if a lot of yeah, a lot of my sort of responses are just like internalized racism where people still don't see me as mixed race or still don't see me as brown, and I feel like I almost have to like convince them that I am.
Yeah, I get you.
So yeah, yeah, it's a really, really weird one for that. And in a similar kind of vein, I think when I first came out as non-binary, I was like, oh God, I owe people androgyny because that was my initial understanding of it. And it took, a little bit of sitting down and trying to figure it out. I was like, no, I don't. Like, I can look however the fuck I want. It doesn't mean that I suddenly have to do X, Y, and Z to suddenly be perceived as like somewhere on the androgyny scale. I can still be myself, but I've just changed my pronouns with that. And I think that is sometimes what confuses people because I can be still quite femme presenting to a degree. So people just won't consider or think about it when, I tell them that I've changed my pronouns.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely that level of assumption that comes with presentation versus internal feeling. And I think that kind of hits the nail on the head of I think where people find it so hard to understand is I think where you've got so much bullshit coming from influencers that people then like believe it. Like, I mean, the best example I can use of that is like the Mike O'Hearn thing he posted the other day, and I just thought it was so like it was all like it's like I think it's pretty disgusting what he's implying, but it was almost like so ridiculous. I just was kind of like, what are you even saying? It was he made a post. It was him dressed up as Superman, his wife dressed up as Wonder Woman, and his kid in an outfit. And it was my generation had Wonder Woman, your generation has to wonder if it's a woman. And it's just this implication that anyone who's trans is like a sexual predator trying to trick
Yeah,
you. And it's just so
yeah,
like, and it's just the lack of understanding of what people are. And I think it's the same
yeah,
thing with if you're someone who's changed their pronouns. People go, but you look like that. And if you look like that, you
yeah,
have to think like that. And it's like,
yeah,
and then it's like these other people have decided if you're trans, you just are a sexual predator. And it's so ridiculous
yeah,
because it's like, they're just normal people who, with one facet of their personality, is slightly different. And like for me, I
yeah.
would say, and this is something I think people forget as well. For me, I would say that my sex plays into my gender identity. But I can still understand that for some people, their sex doesn't play into their gender identity. I don't necessarily need to feel that myself because I don't. That's not the way I perceive my gender. But I can totally appreciate how I perceive it is nothing to do with how like you perceive it or how like fucking Steve from Essex perceives it. Do you know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
people get into this weird thing where because if they were you, they would perceive it that way. They can't just accept what you are and they have to try and put like pieces around it.
I think a lot of it comes down to like, number one, a lack of empathy for others' individual choices in life and what they choose to do. I think it also comes down to people living in a very, very binary construct of how they view the world. And look, stereotypes do exist so that people can understand who they are interacting with or where they are going, but they obviously have like massive limitations because there are so
Yeah.
many nuances and differences with individuals in a specific group, whether we're thinking about race, whether we are thinking about any person in like the queer sphere, there are so many different types of individuals in that, and having one stereotype is just not representative of everyone. But I understand to a degree that stereotype helps an individual gain control over their perception of that other individual. But it becomes limiting when they're not willing to understand that individual's nuances at all. And it's like, well, okay, but now you're just implementing harm onto that individual because you're not willing to sit down and unpack your own transphobia, racism, sexism, whatever it may be, in order to just understand this other human being.
Yeah.
And I think it is just down to a lack of compassion and empathy that people have for one another.
100%. That makes so much sense to me. And I think, interestingly enough, being in Brazil has been a bit of an eye opener to this for me because in Brazil, everyone is mixed race. Like, that's the only way I can describe it. Like, I look so average here. It's insane. Like, people come up to me and assume I'm Brazilian. They just start talking, and I'm like, and I'll like reply, and they'll be like, Mexican? And I'll be like, no, eu soy inglés. And they'll be like, English? They'll be like, English? No, they can, no, no, no. Not English, Brasileiro. And I'm like, I'm not Brazilian, mate. Because everyone here is mixed. And you know, they might be darker, they might be lighter. Like, there's some people who look like M, there's some people who look like me, there's some people who are super dark. But there's just no assumption on who you are,
Yeah.
what you do based on skin color. They just assume you're Brazilian because everyone is Brazilian. M sticks out like a sore thumb because she hasn't got the tan yet. But there's plenty of people who are like who have the exact same sort of like skin complexion as M, but are just more tan because they've lived in Brazil for however many years. But that's been really fascinating because it's like in England, race is a thing where that people assume about you. You know,
Yeah.
being brown, people often assume that I'm not going to be as well spoken. I think, and one of the things I've actually experienced over my life is people tend to assume I'm a lot more stupid than I am, and then they talk to me
Yeah.
for like a little bit, and they go, "Oh, you're quite clever, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've gone to a couple of the best universities in the country. I work really hard. I went to got the best grades in my school for my GCSEs. Like, yeah, I kind of know what's going on." But there's that baseline assumption that, oh, well, you're brown, so you probably come from a poorer area. You're probably less intelligent, and it's not even necessarily conscious. But then
Yeah.
seeing the change here has been really kind of mind blowing, actually, just to see how un of a question it is. And I think it brings me to this idea of like representation. And I think where you hit the nail on the head is like you were saying, people have these really basic stereotypes and are
Yeah.
unwilling to look at the person in front of them. And I think a lot of people do that because they just have apps like, well, that not they don't have, there just isn't representation of these groups where you can't just look on the TV and see 10 people who identify as they, them, who all have wildly different personalities and ways of expressing and wants in the world. Um, yeah, and I think representation could make a massive difference, which when I was younger I didn't really get, and now I'm like, oh, that needs to be a thing.
Yeah, well, same with like myself. Like, I didn't look, all my role models for my entire life have been white.
Yeah,
There were no Indian people that I saw in the spotlight in my very Western centric world who did anything relating to movement or listen to the type of music I did or were queer. Obviously, yes, Bollywood does exist, but
yeah.
internalized racism over here didn't want to associate with that. So
English people
I was,
don't let that happen, do they? It's like it's good. They're gonna make fun of you if you're like, oh, I watch Bollywood movies. Like it's just
yeah,
England.
yeah. So, yeah, I didn't have any role models, whether they were from India, whether they were mixed race, like specifically a brown mixed race individual, or anyone who was queer. Didn't have any of that. So I've just kind of like navigated life, just kind of guessing sometimes, and like
Yeah,
just seeing how I get on with stuff. And a lot of it has been like playing around with my identity and how I express myself. But, I'm now in a position now where I'm seeing loads of representation from loads of different backgrounds and I want to be a part of it. And I want to be able to like provide a platform for like, younger Olive that I didn't
yeah.
have. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I totally get that. I had a really similar thing, and I always found it interesting because both my parents are women. My granddad
Yeah.
is like the only, so like no one I ever had as a role model looks like me. My granddad's male, but he's white, and he's like super white looking, so he doesn't look like me. Both my parents are a different, well, slightly half different race to me in that sense, but also
Yeah.
both women. So all of that kind of like standard, like, oh, the son looks up to the dad or blah 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 just didn't exist for me, and it was never
Mm.
a problem. And I don't know if you
Yeah.
found this. I think as a mixed race person, I find it really easy to just look at someone who doesn't look like me and go, I can see myself in them, because you kind of see
Yeah.
like past it a little bit. And I think for a
Yeah.
long time that convinced me that representation wasn't important, because I was like, well, you can just, it doesn't matter. But what I'm seeing now, especially as we see this change in the fitness industry, is where the vast majority in the fitness industry are 6 foot white males, a lot of them on gear, super shredded. And then you see their opinions on things, because a lot of those people, and it's not to say that like white people can't have mixed friends, it's not to say white people can't be in the allyship or anything. Of course they can. There's like my mum, I would say, who is a white woman, holds less racist tendencies than me, because when she grew up, she went to a school where the white people were a minority and it was black and Muslim people everywhere. And she just has none
Uh-huh.
of those like built-in assumptions that I have from growing in a white city. But when you only have like white male representation trickling down, I think what we're seeing now in the younger generation is that want to attack anything that isn't that. I mean, I see it on my posts all the time. If I just say, hey, it's not cool to make fun of people for being gay, they should be allowed in the gym. And then people are like raging on the comments, like, it's mental illness, it's this, and it's like, where have you got this
Right.
from, bro?
That's your post the other day when you were talking about it. The amount of negative comments really shocked me. But also,
Yeah,
like, I'm also not surprised considering the types of individuals that have big platforms now, like that are
yeah.
within the fitness space. But it was like insane reading some of the comments, particularly the ones with like, um, I think there was one that really stood out to me. It was like racism and sexism bad, homophobia, transphobia, okay. I was like,
It just makes no sense.
Yeah, I was like, and there's no point in arguing with these people because they're never going to take you seriously at
No, because
all.
if you argue back as someone in that group, you're just insane,
Mm.
and that's all they can see. And it's really sad actually, because what's scary as well is you see a lot of people try and use like religion and stuff to justify it as well, but it's like no religion in the world calls for discrimination of people. I mean, there's probably one someone can pull out, but it's like, let's be real, the vast majority of all religions teach tolerance and love. Like, that's really what religion is about. And you see people using religion to justify it, or just like blatant ignorance. Like, I go back to that example of whoever Chris Williamson had on, is I don't think that guy was on there trying to do any harm. I think he genuinely wants to help young men who feel lost in the world. But when you present that the only way to be a male is these 4 things or a woman can't love you, then you've not just said they need to do those 4 things, which arguably on their own are good. You should make your partner feel safe. It is good to financially contribute. It's good to be emotionally
Yeah.
stable. Like, all of those things are good. But if you eliminate the ability for you to not have to be a physical defense for your wife, like, you
Mm.
don't have to. Like, if you're disabled, well, yeah, you're probably not going to do that well in the fight. Does that make you any less of a man? No. But
Yeah.
when young men, like 18-year-olds, hear that, well, they go, well, if I can't do that, then I'm not a man. And it's like,
Yeah.
it just causes these issues on top of issues. And I really do think, the more and more I think about it, that representation and just having like open discussions about just being different, but also being part of this industry, to me seems like the biggest solution.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think being able to like platform a wider variety of people and show that that fitness and health is for everyone is the way forwards. And I think there are a lot of people that are actively trying to do that and have been doing that for years. But I think right now, the way everything is going, it's sort of heading in the opposite direction from that. Again, like you were sort of saying, the white straight cis men are all getting these massive platforms who are on gear, who have shredded bodies or whatever. And I think the algorithm definitely plays into it. It's also like a part of like pretty privileged, you know what I mean? Where those types of individuals are going to be pushed to the forefront of the algorithm. And as a result, more and more people will see them compared to, I don't know, say like yourself, for example, who doesn't
Yeah.
fit into that Western ideal beauty standard or body type. Um, you see it in the yoga sphere as well. Like there are many, many South Asian creators who do similar content or do speak a lot about cultural appropriation within the yoga sphere in the West, but their reach is just so much lower compared to like a white yoga teacher in Bali.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a fucking shame. It's such a shame. But
Yeah.
you're right. I think I'm a great example actually, because this is something I've always been really aware of, and it's why when I started, I went so hard on content, and I was like, I'm posting every day, twice a day, and I'm just going to attack it. Because the reality is, like, there are plenty of people who sell absolute nonsense advice, will not put effort into their content. They just take their shirt off and they can get a few million views. Like, I'm 5'2". I weigh I weigh 73 kilos on a good day. I'm never going to be able to take my top off and get a million views. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's not actually possible. So it's like, you do end up with this thing where it's like, well, the people who look like the thing that pushes the fitness industry get pushed more. You kind of have
Mm.
this trickle back effect where, and I mean, like, we both have pretty sizable platforms, you know, to be fair. I think we can both say we do move towards the forefront of it, but we are in somewhat outliers from the fact that we
Yeah.
are there. Like, there's not many of us that are there with the same backgrounds as us. It's pretty rare. And I think it's almost
Mm.
having this like self reinforcing problem, because the less people see of people like us, the more they start picking up these kind of weird views. And to be clear, it's really not all white creators. Like, there's a guy called Hey Brother Johnny. I don't know if you've seen him. I've shared him a couple of times. He's working with our team, and he is like tall, jacked, handsome as fuck, but he's also lovely, really well spoken, super aware of the problems that are going on in the industry, and really wants to make a positive change. And I think voices like that are going to be essential to make a difference, because it's easier for a lot of people on the kind of like wrong side of the road, as I would say, to trust him. Because, and I don't know if you found this, if someone who looks like us speaks out, it's immediately called playing the victim card, or it's like, oh, how much more representation do you need? It's like, people have a scarcity mindset about people saying we
Yeah.
should just be inclusive. It's like so bizarre.
It's a really bizarre one. And I think also like I don't know if people just find it way too confronting because they're then met with a certain level of privilege that they haven't really realized for themselves yet. Like people can just kind of happily exist in the world and not consider these issues until someone like us brings it to the forefront. And then it's like, this is way too much for me to handle and conceptualize because you're asking them to like think about their entire world and their entire structure that they've lived in for X amount of years. And it can be really intense for some people to think about it that way. They also don't want to be labeled as bad or anything like that. So then the knock-on effect goes to us being like, oh, you're too dramatic, you're too loud, you're like pulling the race card, you're doing this, you're doing that. And it's like, well, no, I'm just asking you to empathize with my position for a second and understand like what your privilege has given you, like
Yeah.
whatever that might look like. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying, look, if you have a certain level of privilege, like fucking great, good for you, but maybe use that to elevate other people and to help other people out, like your mate, Hey Brother Johnny, is doing.
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's not
100%.
that hard.
And it's a lot of these people who push back against it is like, just look at the comments, mate. Just look at what people are saying. It's not made up. And I think the problem is people want to push back because you're right. They don't want to label themselves as that bad thing. And actually, I think a lot of men will be able to relate to this. And I do wonder if the pushback people have now is potentially related to the Me Too movement. Because I remember, especially being, how old would I have been? Maybe 18, 17. I think a lot of men had this real realization where all of this was getting thrown in your face. And for the vast majority, like, most men have not been like sexually abusing hundreds of women. Most men are not raping anyone. But I think for a lot of us, we suddenly turned around and went, oh yeah, I've probably kissed a girl when they're a bit too drunk. Or like, have I ever been too pushy? Were they fully comfortable? Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
and I think for a lot of men, they kind of had to do that really uncomfortable thing where you go, okay, I'm going to change my behaviour so I'm better in the future. And I think the vast majority of us did, because I think there's more conversation around it, especially like I've noticed with male people in particular. People do have a better understanding of consent and things now. Like, it's definitely a more spoken about and considered thing amongst guys. But I remember it being extremely uncomfortable to look at. And I would consider myself as someone who's like relatively good in that space. But there's always things you kind of need to look at and go, am I actually being as good as I could be in this
Yeah.
scenario? And I think a lot of people don't want to go back through that feeling, whether it comes to race or how they're treating people of a different sexual orientation, how they're treating people with a different gender orientation. And I don't know what would make it easier. I think this is one of the reasons I'm against cancel culture, because I'm like, how do people improve if one mistake makes you damned forever if you try and be better. Of course, there's like, I'm not saying like if Jeffrey Epstein said sorry, it's suddenly okay. Do you know what I mean? There's some things where it's like you fucked up big time there, mate. That one's
Yeah.
not really going off your record. But I think it's like, yeah, what I would love to see is people, if we say, hey, homophobia is bad, racism towards black people in the fitness industry is bad, maybe people going, yeah, it is bad. Do you know what? In the future, I'm going to call it out. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean I'm bad if I haven't called it out before. I just hadn't had a look at my position and thought about it, and that's okay.
Yeah. 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 I wonder if like people were braver enough to use their privilege to call stuff out, whether or not we would start to notice some change. But I don't know about you, but I wonder if like majority of this behavior is just in the online sphere where people feel they can hide behind a screen and say this stuff with limited consequences compared to if they were to have these actions and words in person. Don't get me wrong, I'm still saying like things in person obviously still do happen, but I'm saying I wonder if it's now shifted to more online compared to in
Yeah,
person.
I think you're probably right. I'm convinced that 99% of people who like call me racist names online or like say that you're like mentally ill if you're gay, they'd never say it to my face because they get
No,
punched in the face. And that's like, that's not that's not to be like, oh, violence is really good. But like if someone starts coming and screaming racist things at me, it's like, well, we're gonna fight. Like we're not gonna have a conversation there, are we? It's like I'm gonna assume you're gonna attack me more than verbally if you're gonna come and get in my face and start screaming. So like it's just gonna be a fight. And I don't think any of these people want that. I don't think they believe in these things enough to want to engage in that. Because if they did, they'd be in the KKK. And I don't think the KKK is like a rapidly growing group of like wanting to kill black people or anything. I don't think that's really the case. But they clearly hold these opinions and feel the need to express them. And they feel
yeah,
the need to defend their position when it's challenged. Like you say, when they see it called out, they get defensive. And I think that shows that it's, even if they're more comfortable expressing it online, it's clearly a position that they feel somewhat as part of their identity. And what I don't know what changes that or what we can do as creators to change that in a way that they feel comfortable with. That's the thing I think I get lost on because you try and talk about it, they're like, yeah, but what about this? But what about that? It's
yeah,
like, yeah, but I'm kind of talking about this problem now, mate.
yeah. I think the issue is when like someone so heavily has that part, or they so heavily identify with that that it is like an integral part of their identity, you're then challenging their entire worldview and like ecosystem and landscape of like how they navigate themselves in the world. Like the idea that I'm kind of pulling from is like when I was vegan back in the day for like 4 years, I was like, as we all
The
were,
gang.
I was like, literally, I was like thrust into this world where like being vegan was a massive personality type for me because it's one of those things that I latched onto and I felt like that is what gave me value as a person. So anyone who challenged my opinions on veganism, like including my family, I wasn't like the best person as well when it came to this. Like I would have full on arguments with my family about their ethics around eating certain foods. And we did fall out over it. And I can like hold my hands up and be like, I was an asshole about it. But it was because my identity was threatened, and
Yeah.
that's why I reacted so strongly. So when people like identify with these memes and there's a threat to, whatever opinion, viewpoint of the world they have, they will react strongly to defend it because they will die on
Mm.
that hill in order to protect themselves.
Yeah. Do you know what? That's a
Mm.
really interesting thing you've just kind of pinned there. That's triggered something for me a little bit because I think as well, one of the reasons we see this pushback, as soon as you go, yeah, well, it's okay to be gay and go to the gym. It's okay to be feminine and go to the gym. It's okay to not necessarily like want to call yourself a he because you've got a dick. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, it does challenge their, like you say, their identity and their perceptions of themselves. Like a lot of young men in particular are like, I am masculine because I do this. I'm going to get a wife because I do this. And if I am a straight man, this is what I am. And as soon as someone goes, yeah, but you can be brown and do that, or like you can You can be pretty femme and do that. That it's like
Yeah.
you're right. I think it is somewhat of like a disruption of how they've kind of just designed themselves in the world. Not designed isn't the right word. Like I don't know
I think
what the
it's
right
like
word is. I hope maybe that will translate. Maybe you've got something that can kind of like fit in there. I hope it made sense. That was just a lot of thoughts all in one jumble.
no, but I think you're right. It's like how people have slotted themselves in within the world, right? And like the version of their avatar that they've curated in order to fit whatever perceptions they have. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, yeah, and no, and it's. I think there's all these different things that kind of like it's everything from lack of representation of other people to identity, and all these things are kind of piling into one. And when you throw in the kind of like manosphere of people and people that people respect, like Mike O'Hearn has no need to be creating memes that are implying all trans people are sexual predators, like trying to trick people. Like it's just so ridiculous. It's not what any trans person in the world. I mean, there's going to be one or two, but it's like if you're a sexual predator, you're just a sexual predator. It's nothing to do with being trans or straight. And it's like, let's be honest, most paedophiles are like Catholic priests. Like, it's not really the trans people we've got to overly worry about.
This is what I don't understand. And this is like, all thanks to Voldemort, or for those of you who aren't in the world, J.K. Rowling. This is all because of her.
I had no idea you were going to say that.
I'm dead. Okay.
Mate, I'm so upset
Basically,
J.K. Rowling turned out to be horrible because I really like
oh
Harry
yeah,
Potter.
like cancelled for life. Um, but yeah, like her whole reasoning for passing that law in the Supreme Court a couple months ago was to protect biological women. And the whole thing was we need to keep trans women out of our bathrooms because we need to protect our cis women. And it's like, again, what you're saying now is that trans women are perpetrators of aggression, of sexual abuse, of like whatever horrible thing you're pushing on them, when that is just not the case. Like, if you strip it back, how fucking ridiculous is it that they think someone is going to, like a cis man, is going to pretend that they are trans in order to assault someone? If someone wants to assault someone, they'll just fucking do it. They're not going to
Just
go through this whole thing in order to get away with it. And I was like, yeah, the whole thing is just ridiculous. And it's just actually quite laughable that that was her opinion.
it makes no sense at all. I mean, like the vast majority of sexual assaults are done by someone you know, and it's normally
Yeah,
a guy you know. Like that's just the reality of it.
yeah,
And it just makes no sense to try and pin the blame on trans people, and it's clearly a scapegoat for the reason they want it. And I think the reason for J.K. Rowling, the only logic I can come to with her is that she simply cannot comprehend not having your gender identity tied to your born sex. Which is like, you don't have to feel that to be able to believe someone else does feel it. And
yeah.
it's such a foolish thing. And the thing I always compare it to actually, and I don't know if this gets through to people, is I always think about wave particle duality. So obviously I used to do science back in the day before I dropped out to teach people how to lift heavy things. But electrons, you treat them as a particle and as a wave at once because they do both things depending on what's happening. So that's kind of the conclusion. Because I used to not really get it, especially when you're younger and you don't have the time to think about it. And now the way I view it is like, well, it's just two things. You can believe that some people find their gender is linked to their sex, and at the same time believe some people don't, because it's a subjective human experience, and there's no way to measure it, there's no way to prove it, and neither disprove each other, nor do both existing stop there being space for both. But I think in J.K. Rowling's mind, for someone to be trans, they are saying that she cannot exist, which is so far
Yeah.
from the truth of what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think going back to what your point was earlier, I think it is a massive scapegoat for what's currently going on in our political climate in the UK. But it was really sad to see, and I've seen multiple examples of like transphobia rising as a result of what's happened at the Supreme Court. So, for example, I don't know if you saw that one creator, I actually can't remember her name. I think Natalie something. She opened a women's only gym in London and it was all pink. Yeah, but she basically wanted to open it up because she had been sexually abused by a cis man in a gym and she wanted to create a safe space for women. Great. Fantastic idea. She had crowdfunded for years. She had gone to loads of different support groups, talking to loads of different types of women, Muslim women, trans women, cis women, asking for their opinions and everything, and also getting money from like all of these groups, right? And then towards the opening, someone asked, like, is this safe? Is this space going to be available for trans women? And she turned around and said no. And it was like,
Oh,
but you've crowdfunded and taken money from that community, and you always said that it was going to be a space for them. But now, because of what J.K. Rowling has said, you've interpreted all of what she said, her transphobia, and assumed that all trans women are now going to attack cis women. That's what you're saying. And so then all the comments is like, yeah, but what about your trans men? Are you going to let them in now? Because by your logic, they're still
they were
women.
women, yeah.
So what are you going to say? You can't turn them away because then that's going to be going against your word. And there was a lot of kickback from it, but again, very, very big creator, transphobic. And then in some businesses around Brighton, which is crazy to me, there's been levels of transphobia rising as well. We had
Yeah.
still have a sauna space. I don't necessarily want to name them, but again, similar kind of thing. There was a women's only event, and they said trans women weren't allowed when they've previously held loads of queer friendly saunas and sort of supported the community in that way, and then turned around and said this. And it was like, what do you mean? You're in Brighton of all places.
Right,
How are you
yeah.
transphobic?
For anyone who isn't English as well, because a lot of these people are American, Brighton is like the queer place in the UK. It's like where you go if you're queer. Not even if you're queer, if you're just a funky human, you go to Brighton. Like that's it. That's just
Yeah,
full stop. You're in
yeah,
Brighton. Like that's the spot. And it just makes no sense for these businesses to treat that community
yeah.
like that. It's really
It's
sad.
it's so sad and really scary because obviously like a lot of my friends are in the trans space, and what I just found like so ironic was like you've now threatened majority of the population of Brighton. Like it's just bad for business. If
Yeah.
you're racist, homophobic, ableist, fatphobic, it's just bad. It's straight up bad for business. Why are you doing it in the first place?
No, it's
Um,
it's ridiculous.
yeah, so that was like a real interesting offshoot of everything that passed in like the Supreme Court or like tried to get passed earlier this year. And I it worries me about where that's going to end up trickling into different spaces as well within the fitness space. Um, yeah, so it's a concerning time.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head there actually, because I spent quite a lot of time well, I say quite a lot of time. I've not been a creator for that long. It's been maybe like 2 years now. But for a long time I didn't think there was a need for me to use my platform to talk about things because I was just like, well, you know, our parents' generations, they did the marches, they were out screaming free Nelson Mandela, you know. My parents are gay,
Yeah,
I exist, it's all fine now. But you're right, there is
yeah,
a rise in all of these
mm,
like isms and phobias. Like you see this rise in transphobia. It's the fact that they're claiming trans women are assaulting all women if they go into the toilets. And I'm pretty sure if you looked at the stats, I'd be willing to put a tenner that less than one a year happens. I'd be willing to put a tenner on that. Maybe I'd say less than five. I
yeah,
guarantee you it doesn't really happen ever.
no.
And it's just
But
this
it's
made
like
up problem.
yeah, it's also like the underrepresentation of like actual sexual abuse cases, like from cis men onto cis women, or whatever it is. Like they're so underrepresented by the media, but it happens daily on multiple counts.
Yeah.
The
It's
stats,
something
like
like
the
90% don't
one,
get convicted, right? It's like
yeah,
insane.
yeah, and it's like there was maybe one case I think that did happen, of a trans woman assaulting someone, but that was one compared to the hundreds that happen every single day.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's like that was where the narrative all stemmed from and came from. Um, so yeah, and they're just like riding that one out.
Yeah. It's really awful, and like I think actually a big bit for me that kind of opened my eyes to the changes, like I just said, it was seeing this rise in transphobia just day to day over like just made up things. And then I started noticing, I was like, oh, well, I'm seeing more people comment about like how women need to be weaker than the man. I'm seeing that like now in like normal talk shows where people are coming on with like just like what is just frankly just complete bullshit evidence. It's like just doesn't it's not scientific, but they present it as like scientifically based masculinity. So it's just not true because we can see all the
Yeah.
different ways people exist in the world. We've got like quite literally thousands of years of evidence of people's sexual orientation changing with society, people's gender roles changing with society. Like none of these things are actually fixed in stone. There's no scientific way that we fully work. Like it's just not how it works. Like, and seeing these rises more and more has made me think we need to start talking about it and speaking out and like being open as people who are diverse in our industry, just to be like, well, we're here, we're different, we
Yeah.
aren't the thing they're saying, but we exist. So clearly it
Yeah.
can't all be correct. And then also trying to speak up for people who aren't necessarily like us, just saying like, hey, transphobia, bad, not good.
Yeah.
Like, because like you should, if you believe in inclusivity of someone, you should believe in
Mm.
inclusivity of everyone. And obviously that's with
Yeah.
a caveat of like, as long as that person isn't living in a way to harm someone else. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
saying if someone's a serial killer, I don't really want to be mates with them. But like, if you're just living your life and it doesn't affect me, why do I care? Like, why does someone care if two blokes want to be together? Like, it's not to do with
Yeah.
me. You go do your thing. You're not making me get involved. You're not making me watch. You're literally doing nothing that affects my life.
Yeah.
Why would I go out of my way to negatively affect your life?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, like the transphobia that we're seeing now in, the 20s is the same as the homophobia that was experienced in like the 70s when people were saying that it was illegal and where people were having conversion therapy. It's the same thought process, but it's now onto something else. And it's again this whole thing where there are just trends in the way that people interact with one another. And what I'm kind of getting at is that I find it really funny when, you know, anyone in the fitness space says that bodies are political and there's pushback from that. And they're like, no, but they're not. I'm like, yes, but me existing as myself is a political standpoint. You existing as yourself is a political standpoint because we're not falling into the neat little boxes of the current trend. So like of course I'm going to have like particular opinions and of course that's going to be influenced in the undertones of my work and how I exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, that's all I have to say
No,
on that.
I think you're bang on. I think you're bang on though. I've never heard someone like make that statement that bodies are political, but they are. They are objectively political because if like the example, I get comments that it's like don't race mix all the time because when people see videos of me and Em, and it's like, well,
God.
I. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, I exist. Like, so now I'm a political statement against your idea that we shouldn't mix races because
Yeah,
I am someone of a
yeah.
mixed race and nothing bad's happened. Or like when they're like, women shouldn't lift, and it's like M just existing or you just existing who strength
Yeah,
trains. Suddenly
yeah,
they're going to make judgments about you, and that's also regardless of how you self-identify. Obviously, you identify with they/them pronouns. M identifies with she/her, but they're still going to just be like, no, wrong.
yeah,
Politic. Do you know what I mean? It's 100% a political statement, and it shouldn't be. You should
mm,
just be allowed to exist, and it really shouldn't be a question that anyone really ever brings up. Like, it's just not for
yeah,
other people to tell you how to exist. And
yeah.
it sucks. What do you think is potentially a way that we start making a change in the fitness industry? Like, what do you think makes things more inclusive? What makes people more educated and just lets people be free to be who they are?
I think it's like individuals who are within the fitness space have a responsibility to understand how to be more inclusive, whether that is doing their own research or whether it is going to trainings or CPDs or whatever and gaining that knowledge. We all have a responsibility because we can all do better. And even myself, like, look, despite being queer, despite being non-binary, despite being mixed race, I can still obviously do better
Yeah.
to make like who I am as a coach, who I am as an individual, more understanding, more accepting, and limit my sort of binary beliefs. Everyone's a work in progress, but we've all got to start somewhere. So I think like making sure we're doing particular types of training and educating ourselves is one way to start, but also actively like speaking about it and not feeling like there's definitely been times I'm not exactly going to like have a whole political speech to my yoga class, because that's also just not the right space for it. People come for a certain reason. I'm not about to, yammer
Yeah.
on about the politics in the UK, but I can use my other platforms in order to maybe speak about that. So I think it's also like finding the appropriate times to have those conversations as well with clientele. If you work with like one-to-one individuals, and it's also about like hearing the types of individuals that come to work with you as well. If they have like a very different, diverse background to myself, it's like learning about that and understanding how that can impact the way in which we work together as well. Um, yeah, so just sort of like seeing those, like for example, like one of my clients in a bigger body, a lot of the work that we've done is about feeling comfortable in a gym space and taking up that space. They're not necessarily there to lose any weight. They're just there to like feel better and want to move in their body and learn something new. But a lot of the work that we've done is like unpacking how they can navigate that space safely, and also like deal with maybe like potential comments or looks from other people as well. And like I've not been in that position, so it's up to me to have and lead with empathy and compassion when working with them. So again, it's down to like, I think the coach developing their own skills, their own research, having empathy for who they're working with, and then using appropriate platforms to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head with so much of that. That was genuinely like just absolutely spot on. And I really liked the leading with empathy and compassion. And I think that's something that's really, really important. And I think pairing that with understanding you're not always going to be perfect. It's just about
Yeah.
trying to be better. So something we've done in Different Breed is like what like really basic thing, because we get quite a lot of trans people or non-binary people through, which is nothing we ever particularly advertised for. And I remember we asked a few people once like what they thought it was helping the, which is why they came through. And like one of the most common answers, they were like, well, you asked me what my pronouns were,
Yeah.
and if you've ever
Yeah.
got it wrong, you've said sorry. What are they? Let me
Yeah.
just double check, and then you've made sure to
Yeah.
use them correctly in the future. And I think it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I think what you said there's just so perfect. Just lead with empathy and compassion. Listen to what people need, and when they tell
Yeah.
you, just try and do it. And
Yeah.
it's okay if you
Yeah.
didn't do it the first time round. It's okay if you didn't know, as long as they're not
Exactly.
so offended by whatever you've done that they're happy to just let you know, hey, can you do it like this next time? And you go, sure,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. And like, especially on like onboarding forms, it's really not that hard to add in an extra box of like, what are your pronouns? Really
No,
not
it's not
hard.
hard at all.
It's not difficult, but like, if this was me now saying coming to work with you, seeing that would have made me felt like validated and seen, and therefore I would have felt safer and more understood when working with you. Because it's not like, some people don't have to always come out to other people. Like I'm in that position. I don't have
Yeah,
to want to over explain myself to people over and over again, like what my pronouns are. It's exhausting to say that every single day, and I'm not going to. So, like, if there's a little checkbox where I can just tick it off, that makes my life 10 times easier.
yeah, yeah,
Mm. Yeah, so it's one of those things as well where it's like inclusivity really doesn't have to be that difficult, and it's really not asking a lot of the individual. It's just maybe tweaking some little things here and there, and maybe being a little bit more sensitive to current like affairs going on.
yeah. No, you're right. It's the same as being polite. You know, when people say it costs nothing to be
Mm.
polite, it costs
Yeah,
very little to try and be inclusive. And I think a lot of the people who push back on it seem to think that people want the world from them, and they don't. They just want to be
yeah,
treated equally. It's like if someone wants their pronouns respected, if someone wants to be called they, them, people always push back on it. They're, why should I have to change? It's like if they're, say, a he, if I started calling them a she, they'd probably say, hey, I'm a he. It's no
yeah,
different. Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
like people don't seem to realize it's like no one's asking for something new. They're just asking to be
No,
treated how you treat everyone. And I think it really
exactly.
does yeah, I honestly I think you summed it up better than I probably could have in just lead with empathy and compassion, be willing to learn.
Mm.
That's it. And I think that's all we're asking for people to start doing. And I think if you're in the fitness space, be okay with the fact that you're not perfect. It doesn't make you like eternally damned if you hold some internalized homophobia or internalized racism. We've both spoken about how we've had that ourselves, and it's something you have to unlearn. But it doesn't make
Yeah,
you evil. And it's
Yeah,
okay if you feel uncomfortable being called out. That means you're learning and it means you care and you have the
yeah.
opportunity to change.
And I think also, like, going back on that, we work with like such a spectrum of individuals that we're going to come across individuals from all different walks of life. And if we get it wrong, it's fine. Like, majority of the time, like, if someone misgenders me, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, it's literally fine. Like, you are just human, and I appreciate it is a change. And it's going to take a while for you to maybe like fully embed it. And that's all right. As long as you're not doing it for like, the next fucking year, fine.
Yeah, 3 years later, they're like, oh, fuck, I just can't remember, man.
Like, okay. But like, it's also the willingness to understand that you will make mistakes, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the fucking world. Like, you are just human at the end of the day. And yeah, just like being able to accept that. And I think sometimes like there's a lot of ego that comes with making mistakes. There's a lot of like ego damage that comes with that, and people not willing to admit that they might have said something or done something wrong, and then that just creates like further and further divide.
Yeah, a hundred
Yeah.
percent, 100%. Fuck. Well, I think that kind of brings us to quite a nice natural conclusion, you know. And thank you so much for jumping on here and chatting to me because that was just kind of like I wanted to do it because you're a diverse creator. I don't know if that's the way to describe it. You're a creator who has a lot of diverse nature to them compared to what we see sort of like as the average in the fitness space. I'm maybe a little bit more like common. There's a lot of brown people in the fitness industry, but I like to think, oh, fucking hell, knocking my table over. I like to think that, I've got maybe something to add to the conversation. And then for everyone listening, guys, I hope that was just like, basically, we're not, I think what I want people to realize from watching this is like when people talk about diversity, no one's telling you off. It's just like, we just want everyone to feel like they can exist in
They
fitness
can
because
belong.
fitness is for everyone. And for the coaches on here
Mm.
watching, if you really want to help people, you should just want to help everyone. Like charity doesn't have a creed or a color or a sexuality. It's like, and I mean, obviously, coaching isn't charity, but you know the point I'm trying to make. Helping people is not dependent on random facts about you that you didn't pick. We should all just want to
Yeah.
help people, and being inclusive is
Yeah.
a way that you can help more people. It's that simple.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like if you want to think of it from like a financial perspective, the more inclusive you are, the better your business is. There are more
Mate,
people
if
that you can.
capitalism works, we should be inclusive. To be fair, I'd say I do like capitalism. I think it's being done very poorly. Like medical bills should not be governed by capitalism. That should be a socialist
Yeah,
approach. Same with education. But inclusivity, if you're really a capitalist, you should want everyone in your business. If you want to make
yeah,
them
literally.
stacks, bro. Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Let's leave it there then. Would you like to just drop your Instagram? You've got a YouTube as well, actually. I'm not really a YouTuber, but you've got a pretty solid YouTube that you do regularly. Drop the I'm doing this like you're gonna type it. Just yeah, tell everyone where to keep up with you and where to follow you.
Yeah. Literally everything is just Yoga with Olive on Instagram and YouTube, and then my website as well. But there's really not much on there because I'm getting it redone. So yeah.
Nice. Sweet. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and catch you later. Bye.